It's time for another episode of Bound for Bestseller, book marketing and book launch strategy for authors. My promise to you in this podcast is simple: share tactical insights and advice you can use to help launch your book successfully and strategically. Hi, I'm Valerie Morris, best-selling author and book marketing coach. I've infused my 15 plus years in digital marketing alongside real-world application on my own book projects as well as my clients. I'm here to help break down some of the big barriers so that you can get your book out into the world. Let's dive in. Well, hey, thanks so much for joining me today. I've got my friend Kerry Dobson here, and we're going to talk all things books, which we do every day, but this one's going to be really, really fun. Kerry has a unique perspective, and I think you're really going to appreciate it because so many of us authors, we're focused so hard on getting that book published. And then we sometimes remember, oh yeah, I've got to think about my launch. I've got to think about the initial announcement of my book and the buzz around that. But what happens when the music dies? What happens when, the band packs up and the dust all settles? What are you doing with your book after that? And that's where Kerry kind of comes in. And when I first heard about all the work she's doing with authors, I thought, oh my gosh, this is such an important topic. And so such an important piece to marketing your book in the long run, because there is that point to which your book, the dust settles, but yet your book is still a great asset for you. And so many authors just let their book sit on a shelf for years and years when they could be doing so much more with it. So Kerry, thanks for joining us today to talk about the work that you do with authors and just the importance of this important season of after your book is live.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. I always think, I never fully appreciated until I was working with authors all the work that goes into actually having a book on a shelf. I just feel like what you end up as a product just doesn't enough say all the work that went into it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, one of the reasons I love working with authors around their group is because it does allow all that work that they put into getting the book onto the shelf to have a further life and to allow them to have the impact that they imagined as they were, meticulously going through their final editing or the proposal letters or whatever their process was, right? Yeah. It was that impact that kept them going. And I think a group is one of the greatest ways to have the impact that they probably imagined as they were doing it.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important because it makes it be more than just the book. It's really about your mission at large, which is why most people wrote the book in the first place. And so putting a group and building a group community around your book and turning your book into, this community or program really becomes larger than life, if you will, and gives your book a little bit more of a platform. So I love that. I guess what's one of the biggest stumbling blocks that people have when you start talking to them about the concept of building a group around their program or a book around a group around their book? What are some of the things that kind of hold people up mentally around this concept?
I love that you put that mentally part about it, because so much of this is the mental part of it. So one of the things that often happens is we want to do too much. So I joke with people that I was like, you had this whole body of work and you squished it down to a book. And now I'm going to squish it even further into a group, because you can't do all the things in a group, or at least not a manageable group, at least not a group that doesn't take 2 or 3 years, right? Something that actually is appealing to people to kind of get to know you more. So the first part is the first mental part is the ability to look at your own book and say, what are truly the key messages, the 2 or 3 key messages from this book that if people really did something with, it would have an impact on their life, on their business, on their relationship, their career, whatever it is you're writing about and how you're helping them. And so it's hard to say, well, all this in the book is important, but now how do I make it so that it's like, what's the really, really important part? So I joke with people that like part of my job is helping you to say no, and just to be able to help you say, what are the key parts if people really took those. And it's hard because you've gathered all this wisdom, you've put it together, you've, made beautiful frameworks or like written great case studies, and you know that there's value in what you've shared, but it's about saying, what is it that they absolutely have to have, know, and do in order to see success in some kind of implementation?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The power of saying no. I've been learning that application in so many different things, not just related to books, but just in life in general. There's a lot of power in that. And there's so much wisdom that comes from having the third party perspective, the fresh eyes that you give to that, to say, this is what to focus on. And this is something that you could hold off on or say no to. That can feel very hard, I think, too, as an author. Like if you put that in your book, you have a little bit of an emotional attachment to it. So the concept of like leaving it behind in some way almost feels like you're betraying yourself or your book. But it is important to distill it down into something. One of the things you mentioned was like the timing, like a lot of people think it takes a really long time. Walk me through like, what is a realistic time frame to build something like this?
Well, part of the reason I love working with authors is because they've done the really hard work already, right? They've taken that large body of knowledge, all their experiences, and they have squished it down into this book, right? So that's the first hardest step. Now we're just squishing a little bit more. So
Yeah.
when I work with authors, it's typically an easier process because that piece has happened. So what I say to people is we can get your group up and running in as little as 3 months if it's your priority. But I have people, it takes 12 months or 18 months because they're doing other things, right? Like, especially if it's a book that they've just launched and they've got all the launch stuff going on. And then I always joke, I'm like, okay, you need a break between all your launch activities and before you start really thinking about your group, because the launch takes a lot out of you, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you've been working up to that launch. Like, it's not like you had like a vacation before your launch and now you just show up for the launch. That is not what
Yeah.
happened. So there needs to kind of be a break in there. And so the amount of time is more dependent on how much time you, as the person who wants to build this out, has to dedicate to it. The process can be done in 3 months or so. I'm
Yeah.
not a believer in the create your group in a weekend strategy that I sometimes see out there. And one of the main reasons behind that is because what I sometimes see people do, and it breaks my heart, is they have an idea for their group based on their book. And then they go out and they build it, and they build all the things, and they build the resources, and sometimes they build the videos, and like they do all this stuff, and then they launch it and it's like, meh, there's like no interest. So part of what we do as we go through that process is every step along the way, you check in with your readers, you check in with the people who you would love to have in your group, and you say, hey, I'm thinking of this. What do you think? Hey, I'm thinking of this. What do you think? And so, you're getting really good feedback, right? Because if no one's interested, you'll know. So you won't go
Right.
down the rabbit hole of building it. But the other thing is that the people that you ask, and you want to pick people who you really want in your group, not the people that will say yes to you for anything you ever offer them,
Yep.
but like the people you really want in the group. Once they start hearing what you're doing, they're going to say things like, when will this take place? How will you make sure you let me know? Do you have a wait list? And that there's nothing greater than having a wait list as you're building your group out, because you're confident that you have something that people want. And so
Yeah.
it gets you through kind of the parts of the process where are not as exciting.
Yeah. How do you work with people that are feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome around
Yeah.
running a group? Because I could see a lot of people, I mean, the imposter syndrome for just getting your book live is a very real thing that authors experience. Then to continue that on, it just feels like, well, I mean, sure, I wrote a book, but who am I to think that I'm going to be this guru leading a bunch of people through this whole process? Like, there's still, I think, some imposter syndrome that would creep up for me to consider doing that with the book that I wrote on marketing. So do you come across that emotion coming up?
100%. So I call them burdens, right? So you have this burden of having to know it all, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh gosh, what if someone asks a question and I don't know the answer? But
Yeah.
that's okay. But we have this burden, like we have to know it all. There's the burden of being it all. We've convinced ourselves that we have to do everything in the group and everything has to be comes through us and all this kind of stuff. We have the burden of filling the group because we can't just like put it out there and have some people say yes. We have to fill it. We have the burden of having this large group on top of that because we can't just have like a nice little intimate group. So it's all these burdens. And so part of it is just recognizing that that burden exists, like bringing it to the forefront. And then there's strategies for every one of those burdens, right? And so what I would say, and I love the language you use, is you're not looking to be a guru, you're looking to be a guide.
Mm.
And so I had one client, we were co-facilitating one of her sessions and we had put everybody into breakout rooms and we were, just on hold waiting for them to be done. And she just kind of looked at me and she was like, I feel like I'm cheating. And I was like, what? And she's like, this feels too easy.
Mm.
And the reason it was so easy was because of the work we had done to strategize around what was most important. What were the experiences people needed to have in order to really understand the information and start
Mm.
implementing it in their life or their business? This was more life related. And so it's about taking the pressure off of being this guru, which we're not anyway.
Right.
Like every human that comes to our group comes with wisdom and experiences that we won't have. So
Yeah.
they're bringing knowledge. The role you have is to make it simple, to make it accessible, to make it fun, and to make it something where they can fail and they can try and they can get supported and they can get celebrated when they make
Mhm.
progress.
Wow. So fun. Um, I also love the fact that you mentioned earlier that you need to take that little break after launch. Do you have any recommendations of how long people should take, or what have you seen? Because I know the exhaustion after you launch, like after launch day or launch week, it's real. Mainly
It,
because I manage launches for people and I just see it time after time after time with people where it's like, oh, I made it. I got to this point, but then they eventually get to this point where that's okay, I got to market my book some more. So, I mean, do you see any common patterns there?
Yeah, so part of it depends on what you're doing in the break, right? Like there's a difference between I am like flying off somewhere warm. I like the heat, so I'm always going to fly off somewhere warm for a week where I'm going to get pampered and everything's going to be looked after versus I just launched the book while I'm, mothering or parenting,
Mhm.
3 children. I have this other business that I'm in or I have a full-time job. Like it all depends on like what that really is. And the other thing you have to be careful of is if you take too long of a break, all that momentum you've created and excitement that people have can dwindle, right? Our
Yeah.
attention spans aren't always the greatest with that kind of stuff. And you start to feel a little uncomfortable coming back to it. So it's like it needs to be long enough that it's truly a break for you in some way, but not so long that you lose the momentum. It's more like a breath. You get an opportunity to breathe and kind of say, now that I know what I know, what do I do?
Yeah.
And the other thing that I would say is if you know that you want to have a group as you're writing the book, you can plant seeds in the book that the group exists. And you give them like a QR code or you give them, a
Mhm.
website to check out or whatever that looks like so that you're still maintaining and nurturing that relationship and you're kind of counting down, right?
Yeah.
Like so it's like the group is coming 3 months after the launch or whatever that
Right.
timeline looks like. So you're creating momentum without having to like be the driver of everything.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because a lot of times authors will come to me looking for help with their launch, looking for help with kind of marketing strategy around their book. And they'll say, I mean, I've got the book written and I'm doing ebook and paperback, but I don't have anything recorded for audio.
Yeah.
And or I had an author a few weeks ago. We had major issues with the printer. And so she ended up just launching with ebook only. And, you know, at first she's all devastated and whatever. And I eventually had to just reframe it for her, saying like, look, like, we will figure out the print piece. That's it. That's a challenge we can overcome. We can't do it in this short amount of time, but it is a challenge we can overcome. But that just allows you to launch your print version a month later, or your audiobook 2 months later, your group program 3 months later. It's another reason to get in front of your network to talk about things. And so I think it gives people a lot of pressure. It just takes the pressure off of just saying like, oh yeah, I don't have to have an audiobook, or I don't have to have this group program ready to launch ASAP. It's giving yourself a little bit of that cadence to come back to it and promote it. But again, I think your point is very valid of like, if you go 6 months radio silent on your book, haven't talked about it in a while, haven't talked about the topics in your book for a while, then your network, it's going to feel a little awkward to bring it back up. You know, you're going to have to prime your audience a little bit to kind of get that in their minds for a while. So
no, for sure. And I heard, I think it was at the San Francisco Writers Conference. I was in a session and they're like, you can relaunch your book at any time. Like, we think this launch date is like, everybody's paying attention, everybody knows what it is, but you can relaunch at 6 months. You can relaunch and celebrate, you know, how many you've sold, or like there's all these opportunities for celebrating and reminding people that it is there. And yeah, a group launch is a perfect time to like kind of invigorate the idea of your book. The other reason why you know, the energy part of not launching your group at the same time that you're launching the book is really important. And, you know, and I'm sure you've seen this, where we don't want to be telling people a whole bunch of different things to go do at any one time, but especially at the launch, right? So at launch point, you want people to buy the book. That is what you want them to do, whether it's the ebook, the audiobook, or the paper book, or whatever, right?
yeah.
You want them to buy the book. And so you don't want to say to them, buy the book and join my group, because that's confusing. Now, which one do I want to go to? The other thing is that by having them buy the book and they start reading the book, now they see there's groups in there. If you've planted those seeds, now they're struggling with the idea of doing this. Because here's the reason why I am so passionate about groups for authors is, most of us, when we read a book, we think that's a great idea, I should do that. And we flip the page and we keep reading, or we put the book down, or whatever. And the group is the opportunity to say, it's still the same information, but now you're going to get real support in implementing it.
Yeah.
You're going to do this with other people. You're not going to feel so alone.
So the application.
Yes. Yeah. So I call it implementation and then integration. And so implementation is making it safe for people to try because they're going to fail, right? Like, you as the author of the book probably didn't do it your first time, whatever it is you're helping people to do, right?
Yeah.
So you got to give that space for the implementation. And then if you support them into integration, now it's more about this is habit and practice, and we're celebrating more, but we're saying, okay, what's next? And then that's where we can say, oh, that part of the book that Kerry said don't include in the group, guess what? We get to put it in the next group. Because when people have this experience with you, when you've helped them change something in their life, in their business, whatever, they're going to say, what's next? What else can I do with you? And you're going to be like, great, let's do these next 3 most important things as the phase 2 group. And now the people that were in the first group are going into the next group, and that sense of community and connection continues.
I love it. Oh, I love it. Yeah. Well, and like, gosh, I mean, I'm sure to many people, this feels like, oh my gosh, this is such a big mountain to climb. You know, it feels overwhelming to think about considering this, but you've done this now with so many people. You know exactly what needs to be done. You know the path to success. And before we were chit-chatting a little bit before we hit record, we were talking just a lot about how, you know, the world has changed so much that some of these more, like, you really have to be involved in your marketing strategy. You can't just like coast and, you know, hit that Staples, easy button, the big red easy button, and expect that like all these things are going to happen. So, what are you seeing as far as like, are people expecting like their marketing for their book to just kind of coast, or are you seeing like people, this mindset shift of like, nope, I really need to be involved in it? Like, how do you see that playing out with the group programs you're doing with people?
So I still think that the idea of a group program is way more novel than it should be, right? Like it's still, I think people are starting to understand, or at least have experienced like, oh, I can't just, have that Facebook group, or even the Facebook ad isn't quite generating the book sales that maybe it once used to. And so there is more of an understanding that, hey, there's a role for me to play in this, whether they want to or not. I still see a lot of people struggle with that, mostly around social media, which is one way of selling. It's not the only way. So, but it's the most accessible, maybe in air quotes, right? Like, anyway, we won't get into the social media conversation, but there's this recognition that there's more here. And what I'm finding in more conversations is people are kind of saying, well, what else is there besides the book? And what I'm finding is there's a lot of people who are aware of a digital product, like an online course or a workbook or something like that, which is great in the sense of it's another way for people to be connected with you and to consume your content.
Yeah.
But if the real thing that you're saying and wanting is impact, there's an active role you have to play in impact, right? That is the point of impact. And so what I say to people is I'm like, if you're interested at kind of being at the pulpit and just spreading the word, a group isn't for you. That's not what a group is about. Go figure out how to be a speaker, right? Like go figure out how to get in front of as many people as possible and spread the word. But if you are interested in impact and you know and believe that what you're helping people with through your book can really change people's lives or can change how they show up in stuff, their work, their relationship, then the groups is a great way to actually help them do it, because we all need support when we're changing behavior. Our brains are literally wired for us to repeat yesterday. So if you want to change what you did yesterday, you have to be conscious about that change, and having a group of people who are supporting you in that conscious change makes it a little more likely that your tomorrow will be different.
Yeah. I love that. Well, and I've seen it so much too, just with launching a book. So many authors, they just want the path to success without having to get in front of a camera or without having to get in front of a microphone. And it's just this mindset shift of like, in today's world, you really have to be like, yes, they want your book, but they want you as well. And I think that's only going to become more and more of a reality the more AI infiltrates our world. Is like people are craving authentic connection with a real human being. And so the more you can infuse yourself into that process, the more people are going to feel like they're part of the story, They have an emotional connection to your book. I'm thinking of like a podcaster that I listen to on a regular basis, has written many, many books, never bought any of her books, but I listen to her podcast every week, and I have been listening to it nonstop, all the back episodes for like the last year. I've been listening on every cart ride and all this. And so when her new book came out, it was like, well, yeah, I'm going to buy it. Like, and it's one of those books I'm like, I don't even know if I read this at the library, would I want to buy it and have it on my shelf for forever? I don't know, but I went and bought the book. I felt this extreme loyalty to the podcaster because I knew her, not necessarily the subject matter of her book. I think the same concepts, it's very true just in terms of a group. It's like they're looking for your insights. They're looking for the extra nuggets that weren't in the book, that are part of the conversations that would happen in a group dynamic. So,
and that ability to individualize it, that a book just does not give you. Right. So it's like you can have the greatest case study or story of a client or your own story. And it's like there might be parts of that that ring true for me. But when we're in a group, I can share my story. I can share the reality of what I'm dealing with. And now I can source kind of that wisdom from, the author, but also the other people that are
Other
in similar
people.
situations. So it's like this tapping into this amazing community of people who care about the same thing I care about. And now suddenly we're getting support on what's happening in my real world versus asking somebody who doesn't quite get it to translate the story you've given them to their own world.
Yeah, man. So good. I mean, like, I'm just thinking of group programs that I've participated in, whether the person had a book or not, and just that bouncing back, the feedback that you're getting from other members is honestly almost as valuable as what the leader or the guide is, giving you. And that's the whole intent of like, sure, I'm going to do this group coaching program versus individual coaching because I'm getting this benefit of all these other people who are in it just like I am.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of value in that. And as I'm thinking through some of these programs, I'm thinking through who led them, and I'm like, oh, they need a book. they need a book to companion all their work. So
it's such an ecosystem. So I always call it the build and offer buffet. Okay. And so the idea is you are hungry, right? You have a plate. Now you get to decide what you put on the plate. So if you're an author, you've already put the book on your plate, but you need to choose things that build your platform, build your audience. So whether that's a podcast or podcast guesting, whether that's having a blog or blogging, guesting, the whole social media thing, that's where new people hear your ideas, right? So you're building. So you get to choose, but there's no right answer, right? For someone that's going to be podcasting, for someone else it's going to be something else. And then on the offer side, this is how do I support people? How do I build more connection and community? So that's things like having those digital products, having online courses, having communities or memberships and groups. In my biased opinion, one of the best on the offer side is really that opportunity to like eye to eye support them. And right, some people will say, oh, I want to do the one-on-one, and that's great. Groups are not for everybody. Groups are not for everybody to lead either. There are some people that are like, there's no way I want to do that. And I say, great, there's no shoulding in groups, right? But if you have a desire and you know that your topic matter is one that a lot of people are interested in, groups are such a great way to build that connection and that support. And then to your point, the what happens in the group becomes your next book, right? Because the conversations that happen, the insights that happen, it's like suddenly now you have a companion book or you have the next whatever.
Right.
And this ecosystem that you're just building around your expertise, your what I call wisdom.
I love it. I love what you just said about like the stuff that happens in the group becomes your next book, because I hadn't even thought about it in that frame of reference of, ideas beget more ideas. And the more you're involved in those ideas, your group is going to help show what people actually are interested in. Oh, okay. I love it. It's so great. Okay. So Kerry, you have a few really cool resources. One of those is your Great Group Revolution. And so tell me a little bit about that, because it's kind of this super secret club. I don't know.
Totally.
It's for members only. Tell me a little bit about that. And then just like, how can people get to know more about you if they want to learn more about this concept of groups for being an author and promoting their book?
Perfect. So the Great Group Revolution is just this idea of, I think we need to change what we think groups are and how we use them. So it's got kind of that revolutionary idea to it. And it's a private podcast because it's about nurturing the people who are most interested in groups, right? So it's that thing of, hey, I don't I don't want to just necessarily be out there. I want you to say you're interested in hearing this. And what I do with each of the episodes is they're usually about 15 minutes or less. We talk about a specific concept in a group. It might be a listener question. It might be something from a client conversation, or it might be something else. And every episode includes an invitation you can take in your own group. So it's that actionable piece. So that's the Great Group Revolution private podcast. The other place that I hang out on, which is where we met, is on LinkedIn. So that's where you can show up if you want to just kind of get a feel. And honestly, the private podcast, if you are interested in your group, is the best place to go because you'll get access to all of the episodes that I have. Once you pick which platform you want it on, it's pretty simple. They all show up, and then you get to decide, what are you interested in? So if you're interested in like, how do I start a group, right? Or what is a group? There's episodes that cover that. Or like, how do I ask questions? There's episodes for that. So it really is the greatest place to kind of tap into it. And then, of course, conversation with me.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, great. Well, Kerry, thank you so much for taking some of your precious time to share about this concept of building a group and a community around your book, and just sharing a little bit of your insider information on what people can expect from this concept. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's been a great conversation.